In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to apply the Raw Edit preset upon import. I'll also be taking you through all of the panels in the Develop module while I do a creative edit. First, I need to import the photographs from my project. On the left, I'm selecting my source, which is my memory card. Up at the top, I want to make sure that these images will be copied and not added or moved. On the top right, I'm going to click on my hard drive and create my destination folder. Since this is a personal project, I'm going to add it directly to my master projects folder. Following the same file naming system, I'm going to use the date that I shot these images as well as a title for my project. Since these images were shot before my last assignment, this folder will jump up to the top of my personal projects. Inside of this folder, I'm going to create my CR folder to host my camera raw files. Now that I've created the folders where I want my files to be copied, I'm going to hit choose. Now that we've created a raw edit preset in our last tutorial, we're going to be able to select it in our develop settings. Click on none, hover down to your personal folder, and you should see all of your presets on the left-hand side. Simply select the raw edit preset. This preset will now be applied to all of your images as they're being imported into Lightroom. Once we click import, these develop settings will be saved as our default and we won't have to select our preset again. Now that our import is complete, we can see all of our projects listed by their dates on the left-hand side of our library. On the top right, next to Quick Develop, you'll be able to see that we have applied our raw edit preset to all of these files as they were being imported into Lightroom. Before we can begin our creative edit, we need to cull our images. Culling is just the process of selecting all of the images we like best out of our camera roll. Before you begin, adjust your thumbnails to a comfortable size. Pro tip, culling is usually best if started at the very end of your camera roll. This is because the last image from each pose or set change is usually your best. In order to select our images, we're going to toggle to the left or right, and when you get to an image you like, just hit the 1 button. You'll start to see little stars pop up underneath each image that you love. Remember that if you would like to see an image more closely, just hit your spacebar. To return to the grid, simply hit G. If you decide that you don't like an image as much, then just hit 0 to remove the star. Once we've selected all of our favorite images, we're going to change our settings so that we're only seeing the images with 1 star. To do this, you're going to move your cursor to the bottom right-hand corner of your module. Where it says Filters, select Filters Off, and then move your cursor down to Rated. This lets us decide if we want to see all of our images or just the images with 1 star or all of the images with 1 star or above, etc. If I decide I want to see all of my images, I'll just unclick the 1 star. Everything pops back up. Since I only want to see the images with 1 star, I want to make sure that 1 star is selected. Now that I've done my first cull, it's easier for me to take a look at my favorite photos. If there is an image that I think stands out above the others, I can select it and give it 2 stars by hitting the 2 button. Once I've decided where I'd like to start, I'm going to select the Develop module by hitting D or clicking the word Develop at the top of my panel. Now we're going to begin our creative edit starting with the first panel, Basic. This panel will allow you to do all of your exposure adjustments as well as white balancing. I can use this eyedropper tool to select a white part of my image to give it a neutral color tone. This specific project is a cosplay of my daughter as Deborah Harry from Blondie. Since I'm going for a vintage 70s look, I'm going to add a little bit more warmth back to my image with the temperature slider. If I slide it to the right, my image gets warmer, and if I slide it to the left, it gets cooler. Below is your tint slider. You can add it to the right to make your images a little more pink, or to the left to add a little more green. Next is the tone of our image. You can adjust your exposure by dragging your slider to the left or right. Right makes it brighter, left makes it darker. Next is contrast. If I drag my slider to the left, my image has less contrast. If I drag it to the right, it has more. I'm going to decrease my highlights a little bit and increase my shadows. Now that I've adjusted the highlights and shadows, I'm going to move on to whites and blacks. Simply adjust the sliders in this section until you get the look that you're going for your project. Now we're going to adjust the presence of our image. The texture slider will increase or decrease the texture of my image. If I drag it to the right, you can clearly see there's a lot more texture in her skin, and if I drag it to the left, everything gets real hazy. We want to save all of our skin retouching for Photoshop, so I recommend leaving this slider alone. To reset a slider, simply double-click on the word. I chose to shoot this image with a vintage lens that has a very distinct bokeh, so I need to add a little bit of clarity back to my image. Using my slider, I'm going to drag it to the right to add a little bit more sharpness to the blacks of my image. The dehaze tool is especially great for any images that might have a little bit of lens flare. If I move my toggle to the right, it decreases the haze, to the left, it increases it. I don't need to use any dehaze for this particular image, and I usually use this tool very sparingly. The texture, clarity, and dehaze toggles work really well for increasing details in products and objects, but should be used very carefully when enhancing a person. Next, I'm going to adjust the vibrance and saturation of my image to get the tone I'm looking for my project. Now that I've finished making all of the basic adjustments to my image, I can move on to the rest of the panels. The next panel is Tone Curve. This works very similar to the highlights, shadows, blacks, and whites that you adjusted in the basic panel. I only use this panel if I couldn't get what I wanted out of the first one. The next panel is Color. I can specifically come in here and make my reds more magenta or more orange, or just simply adjust the saturation or luminance of each color individually. This panel is especially great at increasing specific colors of foods and products that you'll be photographing. For this particular image, I'm going to be making adjustments to the hue, saturation, and luminance of the red, orange, and yellow colors to get a vintage 70s look. The next panel we'll be working with is Split Toning. This is my favorite adjustment panel in Lightroom, and I think it is the most underused. The Split Toning panel allows us to adjust the hue and saturation of the highlights and the shadows independently. I can make my highlights warm while keeping my shadows cool, or vice versa. This is a very popular effect that you see in movies these days. Once you've chosen the hues for your highlights and shadows, you can use the balance slider to decide which one gets the most emphasis. For this particular image, I'm only making adjustments to my highlights. Now we're going to move on to detail. All of the adjustments to our details have been pre-made using our raw edit preset. However, we still need to adjust the masking on our sharpening for this specific image. While holding Option on my keyboard while clicking on the masking slider, I'll be able to see where my mask is. I'm going to drag my slider to the right so that I'm not adding sharpness to the texture of her skin. Now we can move on to lens corrections. In the profile section, you'll see that we still have checked Remove Chromatic Aberration and Enable Profile Corrections. These are settings that were automatically applied with our raw edit preset. Because this image was shot with a vintage lens, there is no lens profile settings for it. If I unclick Enable Profile Corrections, you won't see any changes. If Lightroom applied a lens profile to your image, I recommend toggling this button on and off so that you can see what changes it made. You can't go wrong with leaving this checked. However, sometimes I come across an image where the distortion enhances the style. If you'd like to make adjustments to the lens profile that Lightroom applied to your image, just click on Manual. This will allow you to manually increase or decrease the distortion that might be caused by your lens. If you choose Constrain Crop, Lightroom will crop into your image to maintain the original aspect ratio. You can use these sliders to remove any purple or green fringe you find around the brighter parts of your image. I most commonly find chromatic aberration around tree branches on a bright sunny day. Here you can also customize any vignetting that your lens might be causing. You can decrease the vignette by dragging your slider to the right, and you can increase the vignette by dragging your slider to the left. For this particular image, I'm going to add a little bit of vignetting. Now that we're finished with lens corrections, we can move on to the next panel. The Transform panel allows you to adjust the positioning of your image. I really only use this panel if I have an image where I've photographed a tall building and I need to get rid of the distortion. The next panel is Effects. In Effects, you'll see a post-crop vignetting. These adjustments are different than the vignetting you came across in lens corrections. In lens corrections, that vignette actually burns down the color that is in your image. Post-crop vignetting adds white to the edges of your image or black. I don't recommend using this post-crop vignetting for anything unless you're doing so ironically. The next effect that you can add to your image is grain. People use this to add grain to their image to give it a film look. If you like the way that film looks, I recommend learning how to shoot on film. If that seems like a lot of work and really expensive, just embrace the digital age and leave this grain panel alone. The last panel is calibration. The calibration panel allows you to make a micro adjustment to the color interpretation for a particular camera make and model. For our purposes, we're going to stick with the default profile that Lightroom has provided. You can see what profile that is in the Basics panel. Next to Profile, it says Adobe Color. That's the default profile we're going to be working with. Now that we've finished editing our image, we're going to create a preset. This will allow us to save these settings so that we don't have to do all of those micro adjustments again in the future. I'm titling this preset Blondie and making sure that it's going to be hosted in my folder, Kelly's Presets. Make sure that all of the boxes are checked so that all of the adjustments you've made in each panel will be applied to this preset. Hit Create. You'll now see the preset that you've created listed under your folder. Now I can apply this preset to any other image in my camera roll with a click of a button. I can also copy the preset with Command C and it will bring up a dialog box. This is the same dialog box that was showing when we created our preset, so you just want to make sure that all of the same boxes are checked. Once you've checked it, just click Copy. Now if I go to the next image and I want to apply the same preset, without having to click on my preset button, I can just hit Command V and it will paste the setting onto my new image. If I want to apply this preset to all of the images in my camera roll quickly, I can just use Command A to select everything and hit Sync. It'll pull up the same dialog box, everything is still checked, and I'll hit Synchronize. Then you can see all of the images in your camera roll have the same preset applied. If you would like to try a new edit on an image without undoing any of your previous work, you can create a virtual copy. To do this, you can hit Command' on the image you'd like to duplicate, or right-click on the image and select Create Virtual Copy. Now you can make adjustments to that image without altering your previous one. On the left above your camera roll, you'll see a little box that says RA. If you hover over it, it lets you know that this is your reference view. If you would like to compare two images to each other, click here. Now you can drag the other image that you did an edit to so you can see them at the same time and decide which one you like best. To get back to your one image loop, simply hit D. Once you decide which edit you like best, simply remove the star by hitting 0 on the image that you didn't like, and it will be moved back to your camera roll with your other unstarred photos. Now that we've made adjustments to the overall look of our image, we can start making local adjustments. You're going to find the local adjustments in the top right corner of your Develop module. The first one is the Crop tool. You can use your cursor that has the little arrows that are in a curved line to drag your image to the left or right for leveling. We recommend doing all of your cropping and your post-processing work that you're going to be doing in Photoshop. However, if you are creating a gift and you shot a multitude of images with a tripod, cropping in Lightroom is a great way to make sure that those crops line up perfectly. To crop your image, hold down the Shift key and drag from one corner of your file. You can also choose an aspect ratio in the cropping menu. This will allow you to crop without holding the Shift key, and it constrains the proportion of the ratio you have chosen. You can always go back to the cropping menu to adjust your crop. To reset it to the original size, just click the little reset button at the bottom of the cropping menu. The next option in Lightroom for creating local adjustments is the spot brush. We're going to be using Photoshop for all of our spot healing needs because this one doesn't quite meet up to those standards. The next local adjustment is red eye and only applies to an image where you can see the retina. The next local adjustment we'll be working with is the graduated filter. First, we want to decide what effect we want our adjustment to be. If you click on the effect, it pulls up a menu of different options. If I want to lighten a corner of my image, I can select Dodge and then drag my cursor across the bottom corner. You can see that it's already increased the exposure a little bit, but I can come up here and manually make an adjustment until I get the look that I want. If I decide that I would rather it be dark, I can just drag my slider to the left. I can also adjust the temperature and color of that corner. Wherever that gradient is touching, I can make an adjustment. If you'll notice that this panel has all of the same adjustments that you'll find in your basic panel. This just allows you to make adjustments to one little part of your photograph. If you like what you've done, you can hit close, or if you decide you don't like that one, you can right click on the little spot and hit delete. You can also add a color gradient to your image. If I drag up from the bottom corner of my image and then select this color box, I can use the eyedropper tool to choose any color that I want to add to my photograph. The next local adjustment you can do is a radial filter. This is very similar to the graduated filter, but it works in a circle. By default, all of the adjustments take place outside of the circle that you have drawn. If you would like to have the adjustment be on the inside of the circle, click the invert button. Now you can use your cursor to move the filter around and place it wherever you would like. If you hover your cursor over the filter, you'll be able to see the mask. The red area is where the filter is taking place. Again, you have all of the different effects for you to choose from. The next local adjustment you can make is with the brush tool. It's all of the same options as the radial and graduated filter, but you can customize exactly where you would like those adjustments to be. This tool is especially great for whitening teeth or brightening eyes. If you look in your effects options, you'll see a couple of those pre-made presets already in there. The Iris Enhance preset has added a little bit of saturation, a little bit of clarity, and a little bit of the exposure increase to brighten the eyes. To apply this adjustment, we want to make our image bigger. To zoom into our image, we're going to hit Command+ on our keyboard. We can then use our space bar to bring up our hand tools so we can move the image around so that we have exactly what we want to work with on the screen. You can use the left and right brackets to adjust the size of your brush. Once you have a brush size you like, start painting around the iris. I can continue to the other eye with the same settings. To try out a different preset on another part of the image, click New. Now we can select a different effect and start using a different brush. Another great effect to use is clarity. I like to use this brush to enhance eyelashes. If it looks crazy when you first put it on there, that's okay. Get it on the image so you can see exactly where all the effects are taking place, and then use your sliders to make micro adjustments. Another commonly used brush preset is teeth whitening. I like to use this preset not only for the teeth but also the whites of the eyes. Just make sure to make micro adjustments after you've drawn everything on so that you don't end up with something that looks unrealistic or unnatural. You can see that this preset has desaturation and added exposure. If you would like to alter one of your previous edits, just click on the pin. It makes that pin active and now you can make other adjustments. You can adjust eye color or lip color by adjusting the temperature or the tint. You can also add color by clicking on the color box. If you don't like an adjustment that you just made, remember you can just Command Z to undo it. If you continue to hit Command Z, you'll go even further back in your history. If you notice that the little pins are getting in the way of you seeing your color adjustments, then you can come down here on the bottom left screen and select Never for Show Edit Pins. If you need to see them again, just turn them back on. For all of the editing panels, including local adjustments, there's a little toggle included in each box. This allows you to look at your image with and without the adjustments you've made. When you're done with your brush tool, just hit close. Now that we've completed all of our local adjustments, we can zoom out of our image with Command- to view the overall effects. If you're working on a sequence of images for a GIF, you'll definitely want to save a new preset that includes all of those local adjustments. If you would like to see the before and after of your image, select the YY box at the bottom left corner of your screen. You can continue to edit the image on the right while you're viewing it in this mode. I can toggle on and off some of my different effects just to make sure that I've created the image that I want. To get out of this mode, simply hit D on your keyboard to return to your loop. It's important for you to understand that all of the adjustments that we just made in Lightroom are virtual. There hasn't been any changes made to our original file. If you don't like the adjustments that you've made to an image, you can always start over. To do this, you'll just click the reset button at the bottom right corner of your screen. It's important for you to know that this will also undo your raw edit preset that was applied upon import. All you have to do now is just click on your raw edit preset and you're ready to start over. Now that we've enhanced our image in Lightroom, we're ready to move on to the next step. We're going to be doing all of our retouching in Photoshop, but first we'll need to export our files. I will be teaching you different ways to export your files from Lightroom in the next tutorial.